Summer 1942. The Third Reich stands at the zenith of its power. German forces control vast territories from the Atlantic Ocean to the depths of Soviet land. But here, on the bend of the great Russian river Volga, in a city bearing the name of the Soviet leader, the fate of the entire Second World War would be decided. This is the story of the greatest battle in human history. This is the story of Stalingrad. After the failure of Blitzkrieg near Moscow in the winter of 1941-42, Adolf Hitler developed a new strategic plan, Operation Blue. The goal was ambitious: break through to the Caucasus, seize the oil fields of Baku, and cut off the vital communications of the Soviet Union. June 28, 1942. The German summer offensive began. Army Group South, under the command of Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, struck at Soviet positions. German tank wedges, supported by aviation, sliced through the defense. The Red Army, still not recovered from the catastrophic losses of 1941, retreated. By July, Hitler split Army Group South into two parts. Army Group A was to advance on the Caucasus, while Army Group B would secure the northern flank by capturing Stalingrad. This decision dispersed Wehrmacht forces, but the Führer was convinced of his correctness. Within Army Group B operated the 6th Army of General Friedrich Paulus, an elite formation numbering about 270,000 men, more than 500 tanks and assault guns. Paulus was a staff officer, one of the developers of the Barbarossa Plan, but he had little experience in field command. This would have fatal consequences. Stalingrad stretched in a narrow strip along the western bank of the Volga for almost 60 kilometers. It was a major industrial center with a population of about 400,000 people. 3 giant factories, the tractor plant, Red October, and Barricade, produced tanks, artillery, and ammunition. The city had colossal strategic importance. Vital transportation arteries passed through it, linking the center of the country with the Caucasus. Oil and food traveled along the Volga. But most importantly, the city bore Stalin's name. Its fall would have enormous propaganda value. August 23rd, 1942. Became a black day in Stalingrad's history. At 4:18 p.m., the sky over the city filled with German aircraft. The 4th Air Fleet of Wolfram von Richthofen unleashed a storm of bombs upon the city. Wave after wave of bombers followed one another. Within a few hours, more than 40,000 civilians perished. Oil tanks burned. The Volga's water became covered in flames. Wooden structures turned into a sea of fire. That same day, the advance elements of the 14th Panzer Corps under General Gustav von Wietersheim broke through to the Volga north of the city, in the Rhinox settlement area. The 6th Army cut through the front. Stalingrad was trapped in a semicircle. The defense of Stalingrad was led by General Vasily Ivanovich Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army. He was 42 years old, with combat experience from the Civil War, service in China, and the first years of the Great Patriotic War. Chuikov understood. In urban combat, German superiority in aviation and tanks would be neutralized. His tactics were revolutionary for that time. Hug the enemy so close that German aviation cannot bomb. The distance between positions should be a grenade's throw, 30 to 40 meters. Assault groups of 6 to 8 men, armed with submachine guns, grenades, and anti-tank rifles, turned every house into a fortress. Chuikov's command post was located 300 meters from the front line, on a cliff of the Volga bank. German shells regularly crashed down on the headquarters dugouts, but Chuikov remained with his soldiers. The 62nd Army was cut off from the main forces of the Red Army, pressed with its back to the Volga. The only connection with the mainland? Crossings over the river, which the Germans continuously bombed. Every night, barges and boats delivered reinforcements and ammunition under fire, evacuating the wounded. Legendary divisions fought as part of the 62nd Army. The 13th Guards Rifle Division of General Alexander Rodimtsev crossed the Volga on the night of September 15th and immediately entered battle for the Central Station and Mamayev Kurgan. The 284th Rifle Division of Colonel Nikolai Bachuk defended the factory district. The 138th Rifle Division of Colonel Ivan Ludnikov held a small bridgehead near the barricadey factory, which the Germans dubbed Ludnikov's Island. September and October 1942 became the climax of the Battle of Stalingrad. Battles raged for every street, every house, every floor. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. Pavlov's house became a symbol of unbreakable resilience. A four-story building on the square of the 9th of January was defended by a group of 24 soldiers commanded by Sergeant Yakov Pavlov and Lieutenant Ivan Afanasyev. For 58 days, they held the house, transformed into an impregnable fortress. The Germans attacked it again and again, but could not take it. Chuikov said, "In Pavlov's house, the fascists lost more soldiers than in taking Paris." Mamayev Kurgan, a commanding height of 102 meters, became the site of the fiercest battles. From its summit, the entire city and the Volga were visible. The Kurgan changed hands several times a day. The earth here was plowed by explosions, mixed with metal and human flesh. After the war, 500 to 1,250 shell and mine fragments were found on every square meter of Mamayev Kurgan. The Germans threw in more and more forces. By late September, elements of 20 Wehrmacht divisions were operating in Stalingrad. But the city did not surrender. Soviet soldiers, exhausted, ragged, fought with incredible tenacity. Many had no rifles. They fought with knives and shovels, taking weapons from dead comrades and enemies. October 14. The Germans launched a decisive assault. After massive bombing and artillery preparation, 5 divisions attacked the factory district. The 62nd Army was fragmented into separate pockets of resistance. The tractor plant fell. The barricade factory was surrounded, but the defense line held. By November, the Germans controlled more than 90% of the city's territory. Soviet forces held only narrow strips along the Volga bank, in places 200 to 300 meters wide. Paulus reported to Hitler about the imminent fall of the city, but Stalingrad still fought. While the 62nd Army fled in street fighting, the general headquarters, under the leadership of Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky, developed a grandiose operation. Codename, Year 90. The plan was audacious. With powerful strikes from the flanks, break through the defense of Romanian armies covering the flanks of the 6th Army, and encircle the entire enemy grouping in Stalingrad. German reconnaissance detected the concentration of Soviet forces, but Paulus and Army Group B Command underestimated the scale of the impending strike. The northern flank of the German grouping was covered by the 3rd Romanian Army of General Petre Dumitrescu. On the southern flank stood the 4th Romanian Army of General Constantin Constantinescu Claps. Romanian troops were inferior to German forces in armament and training. Their anti-tank defense was extremely weak. Outdated 37mm guns could not fight Soviet T-34 tanks. 3 fronts prepared for the operation. The southwestern under Nikolai Vatutin, the Don under Konstantin Rokossovsky, and the Stalingrad under Andrei Yeremenko. Total strength, more than 1 million men, 13,500 guns and mortars, 1,463 tanks, 1,350 aircraft. Secrecy became a key factor of success. Troops were transferred only at night. Tanks were camouflaged in ravines and forest belts. Radio silence was strictly observed. German reconnaissance was disoriented. November 19, 1942, 7:30 a.m. In the cold pre-dawn fog, thousands of Soviet guns opened fire. Operation Uranus had begun. After 80 minutes of artillery preparation, troops of the southwestern and Don fronts went on the offensive north of Stalingrad. On the main strike axis, artillery density reached 200 guns per kilometer of front. Romanian positions were swept away in the first hours. The 5th Tank Army of General Pavel Romanenko and the 21st Army of General Ivan Chistyakov broke through the defense to a depth of 20 to 35 kilometers on the first day. Mobile groups, the 1st and 26th Tank Corps, rushed into the breakthrough, developing the offensive southward toward Kalach-on-Don. November 20th. Troops of the Stalingrad front went on the offensive south of the city. The 57th Army of General Fyodor Tobukin, the 51st Army of General Nikolai Trufanov, and the 4th Mechanized Corps of General Vasily Volsky broke through the positions of the 4th Romanian Army. The Southern Strike Group moved northwest, toward the troops advancing from the north. The 3rd and 4th Romanian armies were virtually destroyed. German units attempting to close the breach could not stop the Soviet onslaught. The 48th Panzer Corps of General Ferdinand Heim was defeated. November 23rd, 4 p.m. In the area of Sovietsky Farmstead near Kalach, advance elements of the 4th Tank Corps of General Andrei Kravchenko from the southwestern front and the 4th Mechanized Corps of General Vasily Volsky from the Stalingrad front met. The ring was closed. Encircled were 22 divisions and more than 160 separate units of the 6th Army and parts of the 4th Panzer Army. About 330,000 men. Paulus immediately requested permission to break out of the encirclement, but Hitler categorically forbade retreat. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring assured the Führer that the Luftwaffe could supply the encircled army by air. A minimum of 500 tons of cargo daily was required. Göring promised to deliver 300 tons. But even this figure was unrealistic. Soviet aviation and anti-aircraft artillery established control over the skies. Junkers 52 transport aircraft suffered heavy losses. On the best days, no more than 100 tons of cargo were delivered to the cauldron. The encircled troops began to starve. Rations were reduced to 200, then to 100 grams of bread per day. Typhus, dysentery, and frostbite mowed down people by the hundreds daily. There were not enough medicines. There were more than 20,000 wounded, but evacuating them was impossible. German aviation had lost control of the skies. The Germans created an outer encirclement front, stretching 300 kilometers across the frozen steppe. Inside the ring, in the ruins of Stalingrad, and on bare, snow-covered plains, the 6th Army prepared for defense. The Stavka set the task: liquidate the encircled grouping. This operation received the codename Ring. But first, the relief attempt had to be repelled. December 12th. The German Operation Winter Storm began, an attempt to break through to the encircled 6th Army. Army Group Don was headed by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, one of the best German commanders. The strike grouping, the 4th Panzer Army of General Hermann Hoth, numbered 230 tanks, including the newest Tigers. The strike was delivered from the southwest, from the Kotelnikovsky area. The first days, the Germans advanced successfully. December 19th, they approached the Mishkova River, only 48 kilometers from the outer encirclement ring. Paulus received an order from Manstein to prepare a breakout toward the relief grouping, Operation Thunderclap. But to do this, Stalingrad had to be abandoned, and Hitler did not give permission. Soviet command transferred the 2nd Guards Army of General Rodion Malinovsky to the breakthrough area. Experienced Siberian divisions, just arrived from the Far East, entered battle. The German offensive stalled, December 24th. Soviet forces went on the counteroffensive. Hoth's grouping began to retreat. By December 30th, the Germans were thrown back 200 to 250 kilometers from Stalingrad. The last hope of saving the 6th Army vanished. The encircled troops met the new year of 1943 in despair. The temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees. There was no fuel. Soldiers burned remnants of wooden structures, furniture from destroyed houses. Food was running out. They began slaughtering horses, then ate cats and dogs. Typhus, dysentery, and frostbite killed hundreds daily. There were not enough medicines. There were more than 20,000 wounded, but evacuating them was impossible. German aviation had lost control of the skies. January 8th. Soviet command presented Paulus with an ultimatum to surrender. The terms were honorable: preservation of life, medical assistance to the wounded, return to the homeland after the war. Paulus, bound by Hitler's orders and his oath, rejected the ultimatum. January 10th. Operation Ring began. After a 2-hour artillery preparation, troops of Rokossovsky's Don Front began the final assault. 7,000 guns and mortars unleashed fire on enemy positions. Artillery density reached 300 barrels per kilometer. The encirclement ring tightened. January 26th. Soviet forces advancing from the west and east connected in the Mamayev-Kurgan area. The encircled grouping was split into northern and southern parts. January 30th, 1943. The 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power. On this day, the Führer awarded Paulus the rank of Field Marshal. This was a hint. No German field marshal had ever surrendered. It was assumed that Paulus would take his own life, but Paulus chose life. January 31st. Soviet forces stormed the department store on Fallen Fighters Square, where his headquarters was located. Around 7 a.m., negotiators descended into the basement. Paulus, exhausted, tormented, agreed to surrender. Commander of the 64th Army, General Mikhail Shumilov, accepted the capitulation of the southern grouping. Remnants of the 6th Army headquarters and 13 generals surrendered. Paulus himself was taken to Rokossovsky's Don Front headquarters, but the northern grouping under General Karl Strecker continued to resist. Only on February 2nd, 1943, did the last units capitulate in the tractor plant area. 91,000 men surrendered, including 2,500 officers and 24 generals. This was all that remained of the once mighty 6th Army. More than 140,000 died in battles, from wounds, cold, and hunger. Only about 6,000 would return home after captivity. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted 200 days and nights, from July 17, 1942 to February 2nd, 1943. It became a turning point not only in the Great Patriotic War, but in the entire Second World War. Germany lost about 1.5 million men, killed, wounded, and captured. Elite Wehrmacht formations were destroyed. The defeat of the 6th Army dealt a crushing blow to the prestige of German arms. The myth of Wehrmacht invincibility was shattered. Red Army losses were even heavier. More than 1.1 million men, of which about 480,000 were killed or missing. But Soviet forces achieved a strategic victory that changed the course of the war. After Stalingrad, the initiative finally passed to the Red Army. Germany shifted to strategic defense. USSR's allies in the anti-Hitler coalition became confident that Nazi Germany would be defeated. In Germany, 3 days of mourning were declared. Goebbels' propaganda machine could not hide the scale of the catastrophe. A wave of shock and despair rolled across the country. The ruins of Stalingrad became a symbol of resilience and courage. The city was almost completely destroyed. Of 40,000 buildings, only a few dozen survived. But it stood firm. On Mamayev-Kurgan, where every square meter was soaked with blood, a grandiose memorial complex was erected. Its centerpiece? The 85-meter statue, The Motherland Calls, became one of the symbols of the Great Patriotic War. Vasily Chukov, commander of the 62nd Army, reached Berlin with his soldiers. His forces stormed the Reichstag in May 1945. After the war, he became Marshal of the Soviet Union. According to his will, he was buried on Mamayev-Kurgan, beside his soldiers. Friedrich Paulus, after many years of captivity, joined the National Committee Free Germany, calling on German soldiers to cease resistance. After the war, he remained in East Germany, where he died in 1957. Stalingrad, now Volgograd, was rebuilt from ruins and became one of Russia's most beautiful cities. But the memory of the great battle lives in every stone of this city. Here, on the banks of the Volga, the fate of the war was decided. Here, the backbone of the German war machine was broken. Here, the Soviet soldier proved to the whole world fascism can and must be defeated. Stalingrad. 200 days of courage, blood, and resilience. A city that did not surrender. A battle that changed the history of humanity. Eternal glory to the heroes of Stalingrad.